Everybody. Today I welcome our guest speaker. It's Doland White, a founder of Doland White Consulting, creating the future of your business. So that's the topic of our today's keynote. Doland, could you please briefly introduce yourself and your company? Doland, you're muted.
Makes it awfully hard to introduce yourself, doesn't it? So thank you. The very first thing is thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm grateful to be here. My name is Doland White. I live in the Los Angeles area. I have been involved with business leadership or growing business or organizations for well over 30 years at this point in time. And last year, left my role as the chief executive officer and president for a large digital marketing firm to start my own consultancy to go work with other companies, kind of in a broader based consulting manner. So that's my brief introduction for today.
Thank you. So you have quite a strategic viewpoint on growing businesses today, right? Can you please share your keynotes with us?
Yes. Let me make sure are you able to see my screen okay?
Not yet.
How's that?
Now it's great. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So today, since we've done some introductions, I'm going to skip a couple of the slides and pictures of who I am, because we've had an opportunity to talk about that. But the topic that I chose for today is creating the future of your business. And I chose this topic for a very specific reason. And we'll kind of set the context for that conversation here as we go forward. My intent is, for the sake of our conversation, we're really going to focus on three things. We're going to talk about leadership, we're going to explore risk, and then we're also at the kind of conclude our conversation together with some topics and ideas about planning. Because of where we are from a business perspective, I'm sure everybody that is in one state or another with their business is kind of in a position for continual planning. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And it's going to go quick. I have about as many slides as I have dedicated minutes for us to talk. So I'm going to try to keep this to about 45 minutes, and then we'll take some questions and answers at the end if everybody's up for it. One of the things that I want to start with is I want to set some context, and that the very first thing when I talk to any company is there's gravity when it comes to business. There are laws that we abide by from a business perspective. Thanks to Isaac Newton and dropping an apple on the ground, we've discovered there's gravity, but there are unique things about each company. And today, when I speak about some of these topics, I'm going to speak kind of in a broad term. So I'm hoping that speaking in that broad term is not, I'm not going to be speaking specifically at you about your business or about the opportunity you're considering, but we're going to talk kind of in broad terms today. And in doing that, what I'd like to do is, really my intent is that I hope that you'll find a nugget out of the things that we talk about today between those three topics that you can go away with and apply on your business or towards your business or towards a business outcome immediately, today, tonight, tomorrow, so that you can begin to implement the changes that you need to be implementing in order to progress forward. So let's just start it. We don't have a lot of time, so I want to focus on where we are. The very first thing I want to talk a little bit about is just to set some context around what's happened. In the December timeframe, we had announced, as a matter of fact, tail end of December, we had the announcement of coronavirus. There were a lot of things that we didn't understand, and obviously over a very short period of time, the information around the virus and the impact of the virus escalated. And through that escalation process, we've sent 7.5 billion people to their room. Businesses were immediately impacted. We no longer had workforce in a brick and mortar environment. Companies closed their physical environments, shifted their physical environments to a workforce that was now completely virtual. We can see that as evidence in the responsiveness of how Zoom met the challenge. Other organizations, On24 and Citrix, also met the challenge. But Zoom is an example. their user population on the Zoom platform went from their smaller base from where they were in the industry to over 300 million people leveraging that platform in about 45 days, which is huge, huge, huge growth. So we did that. We sent 7.65 people to their room, and in doing that, we did that in kind of sometimes an uninformed manner. The other thing too is when we sent everybody to their rooms, we were forced to begin to reimagine things. We had to reimagine our business. We were forced to reimagine our careers, our lives, how we trust, how we treat money, the things that we do on a day-to-day basis that all link together, right? Because our careers are part of our persona, our family is part of our persona, the way we think, our mindset, all of these components. By being sent to our rooms and the impact of the coronavirus, we were forced to completely reimagine how we behave, how we react, how we communicate, how we work together, how we may not work together successfully, and then put together plans and processes so that we could do that. And it's that key word is reimagine. This is an event, obviously, that we didn't contemplate. And one of the things that we had talked about or thought about in agreements and contracts under force majeure, but never really had to deal with death, war, death and taxes, as I tend to call it sometimes. So we had to reimagine ourselves. One of the key things that I want us to keep in mind as we're going through the kind of the remainder of the conversation, we kind of start getting into the meat of this, is the global pandemic with COVID-19 or the coronavirus, whatever we decide to label it at the moment, but the global pandemic was a leveling event. We've talked about other events that have occurred in the United States. In 2008, we had the great bubble pop in Silicon Valley. We had other kinds of events that we've had: the housing boom, the housing glut, the housing fall off, presidents come and go, kings and queens come and go. And the challenge that we face with that is they are unique in and into the environment that they're in. So they're unique to that country, that city, that state, that county, that province. And one of the things that's very, very different around the event that we've gone through, and we're still continuing to go through now as businesses open up, is the global pandemic that we faced with coronavirus was a leveling event. All people, regardless of your stature or your status, were impacted by the coronavirus. Everybody got sent home. Didn't matter if you were a CEO or a clerical person. Not that there's any inequality there, but everybody was impacted similarly. So I consider this to be a leveling event. So in our mindset going forward, we're going to think about that just a little bit today. Coronavirus also broke lots of stuff. This is an event that we had not contemplated. And when it broke lots of stuff, it broke things that were interesting, right? So it broke supply chains. Probably the very first thing that I think of is it broke supply chains, and they were unexpected supply chains. Here where I am in the US, we had a toilet paper shortage. I don't know if that was a global toilet paper shortage or not, but by golly, by the third or fourth day of people being sent home, you could not purchase toilet paper, which is an interesting commodity when you think of all of the things that we could have not had break. That was one of the examples that we've seen. We've already seen that in other kinds of instances from a supply chain perspective. So the coronavirus had a huge impact with not only sending people home, forcing people into a rapid go-to-business stance by having to work remotely, but also breaking supply chains, breaking relationships, and then creating all of the stress that comes around it. There's some gravity to our conversation today, and I know that it sounds like there's a lot of doom and gloom in what I'm talking about here, but one of the things I want us to think about is here in the US, since the coronavirus, since December 31st, we've seen more than 100,000 small businesses permanently close their doors, and they're done. I see it when I drive through town. I see businesses that we used to rely on, small mom and pop businesses is a colloquialism that we use, that are not in business. and won't be coming back to business. And even larger businesses than small businesses have shuttered their doors. What that means from a statistic is that about 145 businesses are closing their doors every day. That also means that about 6 businesses an hour, which is staggering when you start taking it down to smaller increments, about 6 businesses an hour have to shut their doors. They can no longer continue. And of those that are in a position to continue, 31% of those remain non-operational. They're trying to figure out what to do, how to get back in business. They're evaluating their stance. They're trying to get employees back. There's lots of things going on in each of those kinds of scenarios. But about 31% of those businesses completely remain non-operational. So today's conversation, now as we kind of get into it, the reason why I wanted to add some context is this is an important conversation when we consider the 3 things that we're going to talk about. And again, it's my hope that somewhere through the conversation or the things that I present or things that I've learned from other folks as I've had a chance to participate in panels and work with my clients, help you make your decisions and do the things that you need to do so you can progress in your business. So let's get started. The very first place I want to start is just a conversation around creating leaders. And we tend to think of, we have leaders in our business, and I've got people that have been managing people. I got stuff. We're in a place where actually today, it's important that we step back, take a breath, and we think about creating leaders. It's now a new, use kind of an overused word perhaps, but a new paradigm in that thought process. I love to always kind of start with, let's level the field with kind of what we're talking about when I say leader, right? So the definition of leadership is the act of leading a group of people or an organization. It's a lot more complex than that, but that's as simple as the statement is in the dictionary, which I found fascinating as a 1-sentence statement on what leaders do and what's the expectation. They lead a group of people or an organization. Done. There's a gentleman that I work with, and his name is Blaine Bartlett. Blaine's an amazing friend and a great business associate. And I love this quote by Blaine: leaders co-create coordinated movement. And what's meant by that is a leader co-creates by working with their team, their employees, their other managers, their leaders, their clients, their vendors, anybody that's involved in that process to get to the outcome that they're working towards. That leader's responsibility is to co-create coordinated movement to move everybody towards the same direction, kind of at the same time. One of the challenges that leaders face is we're now in this stance where we're no longer in a position where command and control works. And when I talk about command and control, what I'm referencing is the brick and mortar approach to managing your business, where you could actually leave your office or get up and go to somebody else's cubicle or call people into a meeting or get in your car and go to another client's office or a vendor's office or a supplier's office and sit there face to face and actually conduct business. In a lot of cases, that is still impossible to do. As here in the US, it's still quite difficult to do that. So command and control no longer works. And business leaders had to shift from the climate of where they could see, touch, feel, and live with that paradigm or that thought process of out of sight, out of mind, which a lot of executives, I remember reading articles about CEOs who said they absolutely didn't think their teams could be successful by working remote and forbade their teams from doing that. So now today we're in an environment of trust. You can't be in that person's home watching that person work. So you must be able to lead them through a trust-based model, which is a very different kind of approach. Very first thing I want to start with is, in order to do that and to succeed at that, you have to have the right mindset. And I'm not going to get into a lot of definition around what mindset is because it can mean a lot of different things to people. But let's talk kind of practically about just some ideas around what mindset is and how you may apply that to your business. So I want to break that into 3 pieces. And we're going to talk about your mindset, and we're going to talk about your team's mindset. And then I want to talk about your client's mindset and those people that you serve on the other end. So when we kind of look at this model where we kind of look at each of the three segments and we focus on your mindset, there are some key things as a leader that you need to think about, and probably think about it on a daily basis and build some rigors into your schedule and give you time to do that. Maybe we'll touch on that for a moment. But for this, the very first thing is put your oxygen mask on first. And we hear that on airplanes all the time whenever we flew. When we used to fly, the flight attendants, when they went through their safety instructions, always talked about put your oxygen mask on before you put the one on your child or the one on your spouse or before. And there's a reason for that. Without that oxygen mask, you're incapable of helping that person sitting to your left or to your right. So you want to make sure that through this thought process around mindset that you're putting your oxygen mask on first. The way that I think about it, and it comes from other conversations. Again, Blaine and Mr. Bartlett and I speak about this frequently. And one of the things that we talk about is for the sake of what? So when you're thinking about your mindset and you're thinking about the things that are going on around you, there are things you can control and things you cannot control. So be thinking about for the sake of what? For the sake of what am I worried about this? For the sake of what am I going to look at accomplishing this? For the sake of what am I taking this action? By asking for the sake of it becomes a thoughtful moment rather than having things that you do and things that you've got to work towards, but think of for the sake of what. We have a tough time with imperfection. I think part of it is just how we're brought up. And in my generation, imperfection, if you were imperfect, you were always worried about, punitive things. If I make a mistake or mess something up, the thing that I could lose my job, somebody's going to yell at me, something could happen. So we have a built-in mechanism that pushes back on us when we think about doing things that are imperfect. But get over being imperfect. One of the things, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the planning section around how to think through your planning. Limit your exposure. Yeah, you'll hear this from lots of folks talking about it, and I echo it because it's very important. We are now in an environment where we're never in a disconnected state. I wear an Apple Watch, right? My Apple Watch gives me the ability to answer a phone call, send a text, talk to Siri, look at applications. I can do lots of kinds of things. Plus, I've got a phone. Plus, I've got a computer and a laptop and an iPad and Googles and lots of stuff. Limit your exposure. Decide what you're going to watch and what you're not going to watch. Now, that doesn't mean don't go watch the news and don't pay attention to what's going on around you, but allocate time to it, but allocate time for the sake of being informed, for the sake of what? Well, allocate time to expose yourself so that you know what's going on, you know what's happening in the business environment, and you know what you can control and what you can't control. And if you can't control over it, be imperfect. Get over it. Focus on the things you can control. Have a pity party. There's a very interesting man out there. His name is Bedros Keuilian, and Bedros is an organization, a tribe, as he calls it, called the Man Up Tribe. And one of the things that Bedros talks about is we all have down days. Everybody has it. I have it. You probably have it. But when you have a down day, have your pity party. Get over you have the fact that, yeah, it's tough. You're feeling downtrodden. You're feeling beat up. There's a lot of pressure. Things are going on. Have your pity party. Get over it. Be done with it. And when you're done with your pity party, suit up, get your mindset right. Think of for the sake of what, and be back into the game. And be careful with specifics. And the reason why I put that here for your mindset is there are things that we can't predict, that we don't know what the specifics are. So be cautious with specifics. Be cautious with thinking that next Monday at 2 p.m. this coronavirus thing is going to be done, because you do psychologically and subliminally set expectations in your mind. And when you cross that barrier and it has not occurred, then it's a negative impact on how you think, how you feel, how your pity party works, all of those things together. So be careful with that. When you're thinking in specifics, make sure that there are that your imperatives are in line there, as I kind of talk about it. For your team, when you're dealing with your team, there's a sentence that I put here. So clarity and candor trumps, we have a plan. So previously we talked a little bit about get over imperfection. Just make sure that you're clear with your team, get the right people around you. This is a great time from a mindset perspective to ensure that the team that you're looking to come lead your internal folks, the employees or contractors or vendors or other individuals that you have a relationship with inside of your organization or outside of your organization, that they're the right people, because they may no longer be the right people. So as a leader in your company or leader of your team, make sure that you carefully evaluate the individuals. Because they were that person before does not mean they are that person today. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. But be pragmatic about that and make sure you've got the right people. The next sentence, I talked briefly about the 3 agree rule. And it's an old rule that I've always had as an executive and as a business leader is, look, if I have a meeting and I get 3 other people in the room with me and all 3 people agree with me all the time, I'm going to go get 3 other people. So make sure that you get 3 people in the room who challenge your expertise, who fill your gaps, who aren't going to agree with you all the time. There's an old Clint Eastwood saying from the movie Dirty Harry, which is a man's got to know his limitations. Make sure that you know your limitations and seek people that can fill those gaps as part of your team, people that will challenge you to think and people that will help you make better decisions, right, as that leader. So make sure that those folks that you're in from a team perspective, that not only are they the right people, they may be different people, but they're the right people now for the new role, but they're the people who are not going to just shake their head yes and agree and say how smart you are. The infinite, not finite view, that just means make sure that you've got people who can think and imagine and see beyond where we are. When people think in a finite mode, when you're in a creation mode, which is to create the future of your business, what we're talking about today, you need people that have an infinite vision, people who can see beyond where they are today. Use radical candor. I touched on that briefly, so I can go past that. But radical candor is, I would suggest, if you don't know much about it, take time to go look at radical candor. But it's a communication method by which you give honest feelings, direct feelings in a non-combative way. But it helps people understand where they are, what's expected, and what's happening, and teach those individuals to do that also with the folks that they have relationships with, again, inside and outside of your organization. And so that they can also help your business go forward. It eliminates ambiguity and misunderstandings. Empower through trust. I've been in lots of organizations where an executive was on a call or a meeting or in front of a company, and I've been guilty probably a few times of this in my career as well, where we say, we're empowering everybody to get their job done, and you're fully empowered. Just tell me before you do it so I can tell you whether that's a good decision or not, whether I want you to do it. Empower your leaders. Trust them to get the job done. Let them fall down, skin their knees, do the things that they do. Teach them how to do that properly so that they're making good decisions in the process. But empower your team through trust. Let your team do their job and tell them you're going to do that. There's an old Zen saying, which is fall 6, rise 7. Teach them that it's okay to attempt something and not have the outcome that you're looking for, and course correct and attempt it again. And remember, kind of as we're heading through this kind of whole Corona event, coming out of it, feelings matter. So as we talk to other members of the team, the feelings and the emotional status of your leadership team matters. So it's important that as a leader leading other people, that we ask that question: how are you feeling, and how can I help you? What are the things that I can do to make things better for you? You can't be responsible for their solution, but you can certainly aid them through the process. So remember that feelings matter. I put clients on here because the client, when we think about mindset, one of the things that we forget about is, you remember we talked earlier about the leveling effect? Well, clients have all experienced this as well. So their mindset is as messed up as everybody else's mindset. They were locked in their rooms. They had to outcall for pizza. They had to do the things they had to do. So Remember the leveling effect. It really, truly is something that's very, very important. Instill in your clients faith and trust because they've wandered off. Because supply chains broke and things weren't available, toilet paper, the normal store that I would shop in or my wife and I would shop in, we had to go to other stores that we'd never been to before because that was the only place we could go find the commodities that we needed. So we wandered off. We left the farm and went to a different place. So instill faith and trust that you are there and that you have their best interest in heart, and do that in your communications. Avoid bad behavior means do the right things for your clients. There are individuals out there who have not done right things for their clients and have leveraged the coronavirus to do things that were to their extreme benefit at the cost of that client. So be cautious with what you do for clients. Get your as in the leader and your team, get your message tight. And we'll come back to that because I'll talk about that later. For your clients, ask them. We're also going to talk about that in planning a little bit. And again, like everybody else in the supply chain or through this whole conversation, as they all connect together, feelings matter. So make sure when you're talking to your clients, pick the phone up and call them, not about how do I buy business, how do you do stuff with me, how do you buy more of my stuff, how do we work together, all those kinds of things. Have a conversation with them about how they feel. How is the stress of their business? How are you holding up financially? I know you're financially stressed. How are you doing that? So take the time to do that. By doing some of these simple things, you've got the opportunity to kind of, and if you notice, these all kind of weave together very tightly. Starts with you put your mask on, clarity and candor, and then remember that your clients have wandered off. Making sure that mindset is across the board positions you and your team to lead your clients and lead everybody involved in the process through a successful outcome. Without proper mindset, you will get surprised. Things will not go the way you think they're going to go, and you won't have the outcome that you're seeking. So make sure that you spend time on this. Now, I want to talk a little bit about risk. I want to be cognizant of time. But when we think about risk, we all have been exposed to risk in the past. Risk is this, here's the definition, right? I love definitions, right? Expose someone or something valued to danger, harm, or loss. We kind of talked about that before, right? We send everybody to their bedroom. We had lots of challenges. We have to wear masks when we go out. A lot of different things happen. So from a risk perspective, there are, again, three things that we'll narrow down today to talk about. We'll talk about sectors, information, and anxiety. When I focus on the word sectors, one of the things that we need to be cognizant of as business people is that the risk is moving from public sector to private sector. So the risk that was being assumed by health organizations, the WHO, or in America, the CDC, or other organizations, those kinds of risks are now transitioning to the public sector. Your business, your relationships with your vendors, all of those things, as now people begin to expose themselves to each other in a professional way. As businesses, so as businesses come online, this risk is being transferred to you. You become responsible as the leader of your organization for how you mitigate that risk or manage that risk with both your leaders, your teams, and your clients, and you manage their well-being. So your focus is clearly to eliminate that definition that we talked about before, which is exposing people to harm, is to minimize that harm. The challenge that you face is information changes. There's rapid changes in requirements. As an example, about a week and a half ago in the United States, there was an announcement by our Center for Disease Control, the CDC, that after approximately 4.5 months of the statistics that we knew for the coronavirus actually doesn't live on cardboard, and it doesn't live on the plastic. So all of the people that were quarantining their food by going to the grocery store and buying stuff and putting it in the closet actually probably didn't have to do that. Well, we discovered that 4 months into the process. So things change. So it's hard to stay abreast of policies. I have a future state daughter-in-law Love dearly, who is brilliant at what she does from a hairstylist perspective, who went back to their salon this past weekend to reconfigure their salon for a business that was going forward to mitigate risk. And in their configuration, discovered that the requirements had changed. So they had to completely reconfigure the salon 2 more times. So by the end of the episode, they had done a 3 configuration exercise, and it still may be imperfect. We're talking about it last night. So we talked earlier about imperfection. So one of the challenges, right? Remember getting over being imperfect. One of the challenges is you don't know what you don't know. So plan for change and plan for rapid change. So when you think of the for the sake of what and the things you expose yourself to information so that you do stay in change of it. Just as a business person, make sure that you're integrating stronger force majeure language into all of your agreements. I have a client who does events. It's the nature of his business. And obviously that business came to a screeching halt because public-based events of multiple hundreds of people all came to an end and shifted to a virtual model. Now, as we move back into the stance from a 3-step pivot back to live events potentially later this year, we've built in force majeure language that says, look, if this comes back, we don't know if it's going to come back. Here's an opportunity for us not to participate in the agreement. Here are the things that are fair to you as the vendor and fair to us as the purchaser. So make sure that you're integrating stronger language into the things that you do that define how risk impacts your business. And again, it changes depending upon the business that you're in. Anxiety is important because, just to be direct, people are freaked out. People who say they're not freaked out are freaked out. In the US, there's a statistic. The statistic is, and this is current, that about 35% of the workforce that's working remotely today, which is many, many millions of people, don't want to go back into a brick and mortar environment. They just don't want to go back because they don't trust it. They don't know that they can be safe. They don't know that. On June 1st, we had an announcement, a pharmaceutical announcement, that there was a shortage of Zoloft. Well, Zoloft is an antidepressant drug. So there were so many more people taking an antidepressant that the company Zoloft, the pharmaceutical manufacturer, couldn't actually manufacture the product. So it's now in shortage and now on an allocation. So people are having a PTSD-like experience. So from a risk point, you need to make sure that you take that into account as you're dealing with people. Don't just assume that your actions are going to satisfy that individual's happiness, because they do have anxieties. And in that mode, the reason why I associate it with risk is the risk is they may not come back. The risk is they may not come to your organization or to your establishment, come to your restaurant. They may come to your restaurant and find dissatisfaction with how you've conducted yourself and you've not met the requirements from the health organization and seek litigation. There are a lot of things that are yet to be discovered as we still work to figure this out. The other risk too is, and I heard this on a quote the other day, is one of the things is the risk is keeping the right people in and the wrong people out. So in your restaurant, or in this had to do in particular with my daughter-in-law or future daughter-in-law, how do we know that it's the right people? There are people now taking temperatures as folks come through the door for the store to ensure they don't have a temperature, that they can actually be in there. So make sure that you're also focused on the right people in and the wrong people out. So in risk, we've kind of covered a broad swath, and risk is a deep topic. We could spend a lot of time just talking about that. But remember, you're beginning to assume responsibility for this. That's the very first start of your risk. So we're moving from public sector to private sector risk delivery. It's still imperfect. There's lots of changes, lots of information happening. So it's tough to stay in front of it. So protect yourself with what you don't know. That's my comment around force majeure. And then stay abreast with information, things that are happening. Make sure that you know from a risk perspective, you're also dealing with people who have been freaked out. I'll just leave that term. and that people may not want to come back to work. Another risk is that of that 35% of people who don't want to go back into a building and you force them back into a building, they're not going to stay. So there's a risk there that you may have a gap in your organization and not be able to deliver the products or services that you would normally deliver because those people just bailed out. So very, very important. So risk. Other kinds of things you can think of. I'm going to make sure you guys all have this, but ensure the well-being of those around you. Just people-based strategies. Act in a calm and professional manner. Your calmness sets the tone for everybody. Your state of mind sets the tone for everybody. We all know that. If you walk into a meeting and you can see that person in the meeting and they're wound tight, you wind tight before they ever even open their mouth. So make sure that you, as a leader, to mitigate your risk in a people manner, you act in a calm. Keep everybody informed. Goes back to clarity and candor. Make sure that you're clear about what's expected. You've got great candor in how you communicate. Reach out. Don't wait. Talk this way. Don't wait for people to come here to talk to you. Talk to people. By the way, if you're a business leader and you've got an organization of 100 people or 200 people or 5,000 people, reach out, make it a point every day, get on the phone with somebody and talk to them, ask them how they're doing. Go find out how your people are doing. And it's okay to say, I don't know the answer, be imperfect, and help that person know that you're imperfect. And like the rest of them, you went through a great leveling event as well. Provide the additional support, ask them if they need help, and don't assume. The key word, don't assume people are comfortable with your solution. Make sure that you validate your solution, as imperfect as it may be, so that you can get to your outcome, but make sure that you do that. So last topic, and I know we're going at a lightning pace through all of this, so I'll be brief on some of these things with apologies, but I want to talk about planning priorities in your business, and kind of combine the first two topics and lean into this just a little bit. Again, the definition of planning, right? The act or process of making or carrying out plans. The great news is all the rules that we knew broke. They broke. One of the things that I had fun telling one of my clients a couple of months ago, as we were kind of in the heat of the coronavirus here in the United States, was flying without a net. We're doing stuff that I've trained my whole career to do as a leader and as a manager and as an ex-CEO and working with large and small organizations. And we're going to fly without a net. We're going to go do our best. So let's put our heads down. So the plan or active process for making or carrying out plans. I've combined this into one slide so that if you'd like to have this, it's just these are, matter of fact, all of these slides you're more than welcome to. But so when you're thinking about building your plan, there are 8 components that you should be thinking about. The very first thing is think from a liquidity stance. Discretionary spending is way down, right? In the US, it's down about 20%. So think from a liquidity stance. Focus on cost optimization. Make sure in your strategies that you are not executing strategies or cost-cutting initiatives that compromise revenue generating capabilities or diminish your value. It's a little bit of a precarious balance, but make sure that you're careful with that decision from cost optimization. Analyze your customers, plan to include components. Monitor your customers is the key word, and that means, again, talk to people. You cannot innovate sitting in your office. Talk to people. Talk to your lenders. Make sure that you've got good financial management in place so that you're mitigating your risks with your lenders. Do your best to stay current on debt. And if you can't stay current on debt, then focus on other capital structures that can help you. Don't allow yourself to fall behind because it becomes a deeper, darker hole. Again, we talked about imperfection. Be okay with imperfection. In Jeff Bezos' letter to the shareholders in the very first Amazon shareholders meeting, Jeff put a note in there around being imperfect for the speed of decision. And when you get to about 70%, call the ball and move on. And he's probably done okay with that kind of an approach so far. But be okay with imperfection. Prioritize for impact. When you're creating your plan, think about your plan as sprints and prototypes. And so you want to think in smaller chunks, and you want to think in experimental blocks and how you're going to measure those. And you want to develop them quickly. You want to test and iterate them. So it's a very, very fast cycle. Do more with less. Look at your business with a day one lens, right? So go back and think, so if I could do this all again, rather than the way I've done it in the last 10 years, 5 years, 2 years, 20 years? What would that look like? And how would I do it? So make sure that you look at your business and focus on innovation. There's a great video out there that where CEO talks about his 5-year-old grandson walking into his office and beginning to ask him questions about why they have all of the things that they have. So look at your business like a 5-year-old. Figure out the why you got all the stuff you got, and go have a relationship with your suppliers. This is now a time where suppliers and businesses are not really two separate things. Suppliers and businesses have got to blur that border between who they are and their identities and come together for mutual success. So that actually becomes kind of a gray line in a lot of cases. So make sure you spend time with your suppliers. That's really, really important. And there's a word there, an old Ray Norda word, for coopetition. Competition exists. Let's face it, there are going to be people that are going to compete with you. Somebody's climbing up your old Mark Cuban saying, somebody's climbing your mountain behind you. Look, competition is going to occur, but go focus on how you cooperate with your vendors and perhaps other people in your industry to create net new offerings that it can be innovative, imaginative, that can drive derivative revenue and change the way your business works. Last couple of points is planning considerations. Make sure you've got your message nice and clear. Be clear on your message. For us old sales guys, it was called an elevator pitch. Make sure you know your elevator pitch. If I'm going to get on floor 1 between 1 and 5, what do I need to know between those 2 floors? Get to critical mass fast. If you're seeking investment to grow, investment to sustain is dicey, but if you're seeking investments to grow, make sure that you have a plan in place to get to critical mass, whatever that is defined for your business, quickly. The old 1, 3, 5 approach, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year approach is gone. You need to have it 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 62 months, 3 months, 6 months, and then a vision for 2021 and a vision for 2022 so that you can continue forward. But plan on how do I accelerate it and how do I get to my outcome as quick as possible. Build resiliency is critically important. When you're building resiliency, you're really looking for what we sometimes fail. I failed a couple of times in my businesses to think of things that are plan A, plan B, plan C. There was an old adage around, I'm not going to create a plan B because it takes all of my focus off of plan A and I need to just focus on plan A. There is no plan B. Let's take the hill. Well, when you go do that, we found through all of this event that you do need a plan B. You do need a resiliency plan. So think about the things that impact your business from a resiliency perspective. Not how do I shift and go to do other things, but how do I bring my vendors closer? How do I create a tighter relationship with my clients? How do I build resiliency in my business so I'm not as negatively impacted as I perhaps was this time? And the last is, there is an upside to this. Never let a good crisis go to waste, right? Winston Churchill. The flip side is there's a glut of talent. There are a lot of new people in the market today that are looking for jobs who are brilliant at what they do. So it's an opportunity to develop new talent in your organization and business relationships. Do that responsibly. Do it with caution. Make sure that you've defined for the sake of what reason behind that individual or those individuals or that business relationship. But this is a great time to fill gaps that you may not have been able to fill before. So there is an upside to some of the things going on in the business that could help you accelerate and actually help you get things done and out the door to profitability faster. Last slide, and I stop talking. You can take a breath. I like simplicity. And in this slide, I talk about 5 things. And I call it my M5 model, the 5 doors of business. And in the 5 doors of business, I talk about mindset as door 1, doing things that matter as door 2. Make sure that what you do matters, that you're not doing field of dreams development. It must matter. Build a firm method, have a plan, have a method, have a way that you approach it. Market it, which means go sell it. Nothing happens until you sell something. There's an old thing that I used to say to my sales teams, which is sales cures all ills. Nothing happens until you sell something. And then measure it. And in that measure, make sure that you have the opportunity to go back and forth and iterate quickly and think in smaller chunks. So on that note, I'm going at a very, very rapid pace. I'm going to call it and I'm going to stop. And and see if there's any questions. And I see Nadia's on my screen over here, so I'm going to ask Nadia if there's any questions or if anybody would like to ask anything in the chat, and we can go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Doland. So it was quite an extensive presentation. And of course, I could have a whole list of questions to each of the slides, multiple ones, because it's quite an in-depth 3D model or 5D model, whatever you can call it. Now, I would have a call now in terms of fundraising. What would you advise in the current situation? You know that it's not that easy. So the fundraising cycles go longer. And the environment, on the one hand, is not that supportive. But on the other hand, we have some shift of investors' preferences to some new asset classes. And maybe there is opportunity as well for those companies who are lean, who are cash positive, and keep up with innovation at the same time with the efficiency. So probably they have, and of course there are some segments which are winning in the current situation and growing with the amazing pace. And technological disruption is also on the way. So what would you advise those companies? On the one hand, those in the traditional asset classes, which are difficult to disrupt and innovate immediately with the current pace of change, and those who are on the top of the wave.
Wow, that's
as long as your presentation.
So look, you know, so there's a lot of, it's interesting, and thanks Nadia for that. There's a lot of things that are really important in what you said. There's keywords, lean, and then there's business segments and kind of where you are in your business. There are some general rules, and I think, you know, not to speak for venture capitalists, I am an entrepreneur, but I'm not an investment well, I am to a degree, but I am invested in other businesses. But from a venture capitalist perspective, if I'm investing in a business, I'm looking for a couple of things. I'm looking to see what you are going to do, and this is a big word, what you are going to do to disrupt your space. I'll give you a simple example. A friend of mine went to our restaurant the other night. He'd been going there for many, many, many years. When he sat down at the table, there were no more menus. The menus were gone. And on the table, there was a cube. And on the cube was a QR code. And the waitress walked over and he said, "What the hell, where's my menu?" And the waitress said, no, get your camera out on your phone and go like that. And he went like that, and blink, and there was the menu. Well, by doing that, simple, tiny thing, they disrupted their business. No more paper, no more printing. They eliminated the risk of people being afraid of touching other kinds of things. And they're able to, on the fly, based on the products that are available to them through their supply chain, which can be precarious, right? Because not everything is available. Meat may not be available. Some kinds of meat aren't available. Lots of different things are still a challenge for us. They're able to, on the fly, create a menu and deliver it digitally so that they can do just-in-time menu service to that client. So it sounds like a simple thing when you think of from I'm going to go to a restaurant and I went, boop, and there's my menu. But really, when you think of the broader spectrum of what they did, it's brilliant because it gives them a chance to fix their supply chain, do lots of different things. From a business person's perspective, I actually believe that there are things that obviously that we still see where people are traditionally interested in. They're interested in tech. They're interested in utilities. They're interested in a lot of the kind of the things that, right, that we view as disruptive in our space. But I think as a business owner, think of the things that you can do that if you're attracting investment, think of the things that you can do that can be even minorly disruptive, that can shift how your business performs. The intent is always in any disruption is to deliver a new service quickly that nobody's ever seen. It's kind of really three things, right? And succeed at it, and you're going to probably screw it up a couple times. But to do that. So I would say if you're in the tech space and you're talking to venture capitalists, There's probably individuals that are going to be very interested in working with you, depending, of course, upon what you're innovating and how you're doing. One of the key words, and I hope that answered part of the question, one of the other key words that you mentioned is lean. So you need to think about, and I went really fast over it, but you really do seriously need to think about doing more with less. And as an investor in a business, I would be looking at a company to say, okay, great. How do we do with carrying less inventory? How do we bring our supply chain closer? Tell me about your resiliency plan. Tell me about those things. All of those things are important. I would almost call them anecdotally, kind of as information, but you want to make sure that you're also demonstrating that all of those things enable you to get to your critical mass, get to your outcome, which is profitability, or near profitability, or you have a plan for profitability and a mechanism to get there that you can demonstrate, and that these other components ensure that that plan can be met. One of the challenges, and I actually think a lot of venture capitalists are probably a little queasy right now because we have conflicting stories, right? We don't know if we're going to have another pandemic event in September. We don't know. Now they're saying no, they were saying yes. We don't know. We don't know until we get to September. So it's a kind of it's a difficult way to kind of forecast it. So if you're in the spot where I think you're looking for that, I would suggest some of the things I just talked about, and I probably kind of talked in broad spectrum because I'm not sure what your business segment is. Probably the last thing is be careful when you're seeking venture capital, and make sure that you're seeking venture capital for the right reasons. If you're seeking venture capital to make rent and pay utilities and do those sorts of things, it's a bad idea. You're going to dig a deeper hole, and you're going to sacrifice parts of your ownership for those kinds of events. Make sure you're seeking venture as a business person. Seek venture capital for the right thing, and seek it smartly so you don't dig a deeper hole. As a venture capitalist, they're going to shy away from, I had that word sustain, right? So venture capitalists are going to shy away from investing in you, because they're really investing in you and what's in your mind. They're hoping that. I used to tell, when I was this is Nadia, I used to tell the folks in my old company as CEO for many, many years, I would tell them just straight out, look, here, what you're hoping as a member of the team is that I guess well. I'm doing everything in my power to do the guessing, and I'm going to guess as best I possibly can. And by doing that, I'm going to provide shareholder equity, and we're going to be able to get some results out the door. So make sure that you're doing it for the right reason. Anyway, I hope that helped. That's a long answer. So.
Thank you so much, Doland. And please join our future Startup Leader Clubs. Tomorrow we have one, and next week, as always, and roadshows, and also keynotes and masterclasses. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best with the best companies to join. And see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Nadia. Thanks.